Welcome everyone to our Balik Turo Online, a free webinar series for teachers in the Philippines. I'm Josette Barakia. I'm your anchor for this webinar. So it is my privilege to introduce to you our presenter. She completed Master's in Instructional Technology at New York Institute of Technology. She graduated cum laude at St. Teresa's College, Cebu, with a degree of Bachelor's in Secondary Education, major in General Science. She is also an AFTA Oliranguro awardee last year, 2019, here in New York. She is a Google certified teacher and a member of Science Curriculum Team at MS 217 Robert Van Wyck School in New York. She took master's courses in biology and creative writing at the University of San Carlos before coming to the US. She's a mom of 2 beautiful kids, a science enthusiast, an artist. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Elma Sister.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening. So our set of beliefs is called the paradigm. And how are we going to shift that or change that so we can adapt to the changing times and we will not lose our students? Because based on experience, the online learning has shown me that I cannot stay with my usual strategies because students can just right away decide not to attend. And so how do you motivate them? How do you change your strategies? How do you change your paradigm? Paradigm shifts in pedagogy, teaching what is essential through technology integration. It's not easy, but it is doable with the right tools and the right mindset. We will be defining what paradigm shift is. Why is it important? How do we shift our paradigms? How can tech tools help us? What is our criteria for success? So are we ready? What is a paradigm? Some of you answered the question I posted on Google Classroom. And to summarize your answers, we said a paradigm is a standard, a perspective, or a set of ideas. Here are 2 examples of paradigms. The teacher-centered approach. I have a suspicion that this is the paradigm where most of my teachers came from. They were authoritarian, most of them, which is not to say that it's bad, but there are also good things about being teacher-centered. It results to direct instruction, characterized by lectures. The teacher is considered as the sole expert and source of all information. Another kind of paradigm is the student-centered approach, which is characterized by inquiry-based learning. And the teacher is considered as the facilitator, a personal model, and a delegator. Cooperative learning is a characteristic of this kind of approach. So let's take a look at this picture. What do you think is the teaching paradigm revealed in this picture? Obviously, it's the teacher-centered. This could be a good paradigm for certain purposes. The second picture is the opposite of the first one. So what do you see?
Student-centered.
Right. Okay, definitely. So you see the signs, right? So
Yeah.
if this were a classroom, I would ask you, so what are the evidences that support your claim?
I would say it's student-centered because activities were done by the students. Teachers will just be a supervisor.
Right. So there are signs, right? So you see the students moving about. Our students are in different positions. Some students are even on the floor, sitting, talking to each other. And one student is sitting on the chair reading a book, and another student, apparently, I think she's asking the help of a teacher. So different activities, student choice, students seem to be relaxed. So student-centered. So one of the strategies you can use in the classroom also is to use a video. So I'm using right now a video that will show you further and add on to that information that we already have about the difference between the 2 paradigms. And this will transition into the next part of this presentation, which is the shift in the paradigm. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay. Take down notes.
Over the past few years, you have certainly heard the term teacher-centered and student-centered, to which we associate words like teacher-centered, teacher as transmitter of information, knowledge, rote learning, passive learning, individualism, closed questions, programmed response, acquisition, pretext. Student-centered, teacher as learning facilitator, competencies, knowledge, active learning, open-ended questions, open answers, cognitive unbalance, authenticity. To which paradigm do you subscribe? Teacher or student-centered? And in essence, what are the differences? In a teacher-centered classroom, the role of teachers is clearly defined. They transmit knowledge and know-how to the students. In this case, only the information that is considered relevant to passing the course is taught. The students, or passive learners, receive this knowledge primarily through lectures and other traditional forms of teaching. They then consolidate their acquisition through exercises aimed at fulfilling one or two previously targeted objectives. Teachers here seek to develop the procedural accuracy of experts in their students. Then, teachers assess students' ability to memorize knowledge using closed questions on tests. These questions have very clear and precise answers, allowing for little or no critical thinking. Student ability is measured through the capacity for rote learning. There are many interesting elements that have been brought out. For instance, the use of practical exercises as well as memorization may lighten the cognitive load of our students. This is minor compared to the fact that there is very little reinvestment of learning in everyday life once students are no longer sitting on school benches. Some researchers state that this leads to an ever-widening chasm between school and reality. The question is, how do we lessen that gap? In a student-centered classroom, teachers become facilitators of learning and mediators, helping students develop competencies in the given subject. Content knowledge is considered to be a tool to help students navigate through the real world, since it is there that they will apply that knowledge through their competencies. Active and engaged students take part in projects, research, or challenges, and most often call upon their creativity to perform tasks. Students use higher-level thinking abilities like analysis, the aforementioned creativity, or evaluation. Classroom interaction among students and with the teacher is much easier to foster due to the annihilation of the predetermined hierarchy of the former teaching paradigm. The emphasis on autonomy in this teaching, or more aptly, learning, paradigm encourages students to interact and collaborate together. Evaluation by the teacher comes through complex tasks and open-ended questions that are in authentic settings. Such tools as the portfolio or gradient evaluation grids allow teachers to assess competency development during the carrying out stage of the tasks and provide the students with adjustment feedback akin to a doctor's prescription after a physical examination. The students feel supported in their quest to improve their competencies. Is student-centered learning so much better than teacher-centered? Well, there is certainly no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Certain elements of teacher-centered learning have always worked well and continue to today. What the student-centered paradigm offers are new methods that bring the real world into the classroom, and therefore tie in with the students' everyday lives. Here is a simple way to help you to recycle and reuse your current pedagogical material to better fit the student-centered learning paradigm. When teachers want to change their pedagogy and methodology, it is necessary to take a hard look at their current practice. The 3 C's of change. The 3 C's help one to weed out what should cease, what should continue, and what should commence in their teaching practice. This method allows teachers a time for introspection in order to reflect on their practice, so as to better provide the necessary material and methods to allow for authentic learning to take place in the classroom. It is therefore important to consider what you should cease, continue, and commence doing. Going from teacher-centered instruction to student-centered learning implies significant changes in day-to-day practice. Hence, it is beneficial before embarking on this shift to take the time to reflect on, what should I cease doing? What should I continue doing? What should I commence doing? In conclusion, if you want to change a pedagogical activity into a more complete and complex task, Then follow the edicts of the researcher Gérard de Vichy. According to him, a complex task should make sense to the students, meaning that it should interest or concern them, as opposed to simple rote learning or repetition. Involve an obstacle that is identified, defined, and considered possible to overcome by the students through their conceptions or mental representations. Give way to questioning by the students so that they can ask and answer their own questions and not only the teachers. Create a space for critical thinking to deconstruct programmed solutions that no longer fit the problem. Be an authentic situation that possibly takes place in the real world, where different yet acceptable answers and divergent strategies are used. Use general knowledge, such as a concept, a rule, a notion, or a law. Involve the use of metacognition, an a posteriori analysis of the way in which the activities were carried out, what knowledge was acquired as a result. A complex task for a given level can only be considered as such if the teacher presents it as an authentic problem-solving situation. Its true definition comes from a mindset and not the sum of constrictive criteria. Happy shifting!
Okay, that was for me a very instructive video, and 3 takeaways. One is there's nothing wrong with teacher-centered. Sometimes you really need students to memorize. You really need to tell them what they need to learn. However, it's not enough. We have to shift to student-centered paradigm because the needs of the times require our students to be able to decide, to be able to take the information, that's so much information on the internet, and there's no control over it, and they should be able to deal with the various information and be able to determine which one is fact and which one is fiction. So times have changed, and remember the 3 C's in the video that says what a guide for you to reflect on your current teaching practice. The first C is what should you cease, like what part of your teaching practice should you stop doing? And then what should you continue doing? And the third C is what should you start or commence doing? So a big part of this shift is your reflection of what you are currently doing. Now, how can I shift my pedagogical practice to meet the needs of my students who are distant learning? So students are no longer in the same room as teachers. You can no longer tell them, hey, stop talking, or you're not on task, or do you need help? You cannot do that anymore, right? So how do you deal with that? So, and that's the reason why we have to leverage technology, because that's our extension right now as teachers. So we need some kind of a guide, a framework, or a paradigm. Teacher-centered, it's not that effective during these times. The student-centered paradigm, yes, I think that would be the one that will work the most during these times. So we need to shift paradigms. Old paradigms no longer work. Use the 3 C's to reflect on your teaching practice. You can recycle and reuse your pedagogical materials. What shall I stop doing? What shall I continue doing? Then what shall I start doing? I did a survey on Google Form just to find out which paradigm most of us are leaning toward. And it shows that 80.8% said that students learn best if they experience hands-on learning. So after we gather the data, we can think about it and do some reflection. This data shows that many of the respondents of this survey thought that student-centered paradigms result to good academic results, enable the students to learn more. That's part of the reflection that we will be doing as teachers who are thrown into the middle of this new normal. So what I did was I took a task that I gave my students a couple of years ago. So the task was to create some kind of a game using technology with this situation. So I came up with questions to help me evaluate this task. So this is what the students came up with. They used Google Slides, but they made it into something that's interactive, which was amazing to me because I couldn't do this myself. So they were actually teaching me something that I didn't know. So this is the good thing about student-centered learning, because your students could become your teachers as well. And if you click on start, you will see things happening on the slide. Click on next, click the items you find on the plane, and then the next arrow appears, and then you see the two people on the island, and so on and so forth. I got a chance to see how my students think. I got a glimpse of how good they were at technology. They were working together. I realized that this is an activity that was good because it was creative, it was fun, it was tech-infused, engaging. However, I need to stop. Like, I tend to have more fun, but less explaining. So this activity does not allow the students to explain more. So if I were to redo this, I would allow them to do some explaining, and to use the words and to use the facts and the information, because there wasn't much science that you are getting from this activity, but it's more of technology. And then what do I need to commence? I needed to extend this task to include explaining, reflecting on how this connects to real life. So how does this paradigm shift happen? How does technology help us in this shift? We want to move from being teacher-centered to being more student-centered. We don't want to give our students random facts because they are meaningless. They will lose their interest. They will stop learning because they don't know why they should be learning these things. We should focus on redirecting them to activities that will make them think about the why. Why am I learning this? It is very important for us to change the way we ask questions from convergent, meaning questions that require only one answer, to questions that will allow multiple responses. Because in life, sometimes or many times, you don't just get one answer, but there could be many, many different answers to one question. We have to shift from being authoritarian, because information is not anymore coming from teachers. It's coming from everywhere. So we are not the sole source of information and the authority. So we have to give our students a chance to share what they are learning. And in so doing, they will feel empowered and they will have their voice, and it will be more collaborative. And also determine what is essential. So there's so much information in our curriculum. There's so much topics, so many topics to be covered. But what is the most important? Because time is limited. One topic could be covered in 2 or 3 days because we have to give students time. What is the most important thing that they should be learning? Let's bridge the gap between the classroom and reality. We have to create a rubric or criteria for success. So otherwise, we will not know if we have reached our destination. So one characteristic of a student-centered lesson is the tasks are complex. So we have several characteristics. First of all, it has to make sense. It has to have an obstacle that has to be overcome. So it's problem-based. It allows questioning by students. It creates space for creativity. It is authentic. It has a real-life connection. It uses divergent strategies. You allow the students to have many different answers. So when you ask the question, you will have to create that question in such a way that doesn't require only one answer. It also uses metacognition. It provides students mental space for reflection. And I see the power of journaling, of writing in this particular case. And it uses general knowledge. In other words, it's not just applicable in science, but what they're learning in the science classroom can be transferred to life. I wanted to have a rubric. I wanted to have a checklist of characteristics of this complex task. So whenever I do a lesson, I will just go to this and ask myself, what does this lesson make sense? Is this authentic? Does it have a real life connection? Is there an obstacle that has to be overcome? And so on and so forth. So if the answer to all these questions would be yes, then I would be happy. Here's one tool that we can use. to plan our lessons and to make modules, the backward design process. It's made up of 3 steps. The first step is identify desired results. So begin with the end in mind. The second step is find out how do you check if your students have learned, assessment. And then the third one is identify the learning activities that will help you lead your students to your end in mind, to the goal. So these are the 2 writers of the backward design process. The principles that guide my actions and decisions. So I'm going to do a lesson plan for my online learning. So I have to begin with the end in mind. What is important? What should I be teaching my students? Why does the student need to know this? And then step number 2, I should determine my assessment evidence. What are the evidences to show mastery? How will I know that my students are learning? So there are 2 kinds, the formative and the summative tests. Step number 3, plan learning experiences and instruction. Which learning activities will lead our students to the desired result? You can create a timeline and give that to them at the beginning of the week. And then there's that schedule. And then you can say, day 1 and 2, you're doing research. And then you read the article about wearing masks, and then group discussion days 3 to 4. Write evidence-based claims. So they will use the facts to write their statements, and they are going to be supported by the claims. And then journal writing, blog writing, and then days 5 to 6, they will be engaging in conversations and debates using the information they have. And some of them would say, okay, mask wearing infringes on my freedom. I don't want to wear it because I don't want to be dictated upon, or I don't want people to control my actions. And then somebody might say, you know what, the science says that the virus could be spread by droplets that are spread when somebody's talking without any mask on. And so the science is saying that we should wear masks, and then so on and so forth. So when students are engaged in a debate like this, they would have the chance to listen to different points of view. And our job as facilitator now is to remind them about rules, like be courteous, be respectful, make sure that your statements are fact-based. Don't make something up. This kind of activity allows us to practice something that happens in real life, because in real life, we're not listening just to one person, but we're having conversations. In real life, we could disagree. And so this is a practice for our students to really put into practice how we deal with each other as human beings. Here's a tech tool that you can also use, articles. So just go to newsela.com and you can find articles of interest, current articles, and they are to the level of our students. Okay, so I'm just going back to the success criteria to remind myself that every time I make changes to my lesson, I have to have this success criteria in my mind. I cannot just say, okay, I'll just do this because it's fun. No, it's not enough. I have to make it more authentic, connected to real life. So if the answer to all these questions is yes, then we are on the right track. Then we are making our lessons more meaningful, and we are adapting our lessons to change. Here's some extra information that you might want to read, but I'm not going to do it here. I will post this on Google Classroom. My closing thoughts. Before, I was content with a what of teaching. Then I realized that my teaching could no longer make my students want to learn. They are disengaged. They couldn't find the meaning. So my teacher-centered style of teaching has become obsolete. My students were passive recipients of information. They were bored. I need to refocus or shift. My students need to own their learning. How can I make this paradigm shift from teacher-centered to student-centered? I've observed that my students like it when they're active, when they're given choices, when they're allowed to make mistakes and are given the time and the space to think and reflect. So then where will I start? So I will begin with that end in mind, my success criteria. What do I want my lesson to be? When I make my module, where am I going with this? What is my success criteria? Okay, so our presentation ends here. Don't forget to write on the evaluation.